Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Docker Community All Hands. This is going to be the talk about building your first extension. So we've got about a half hour together, and I'm going to do my best to teach you about all of the cool things that you need to know if you want to get started building a Docker extension. Now, just to be fair, in case some of you haven't heard of Docker extensions or don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to spend just a quick second showing off Docker extensions, talking about what it's about, and then we're going to do some coding together. And I think that should be a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to run through my slides as fast as I can so we can get to the code as well. So Docker extensions are the newest thing that we've added to Docker. We're super excited at DockerCon to tell you all about. Docker extensions are really great. They're in beta right now, so you can go ahead and use them right now. And they are a way of adding new features and functions straight into Docker Desktop. So let's say you do a lot of image scanning for security vulnerabilities using Sneak or JFrog, or you want more fine-grained, detailed investigations of what's going in the logs, or you've got an idea of something you want to build and no one's created it yet. You don't know if it's important enough to impact the entire Docker ecosystem. Maybe it's just an internal tool for you and your coworkers. You can go ahead and add all of those features into Docker Desktop, either by using existing extensions that you can find in our marketplace, or going ahead and creating them yourself, building those workflows and automations that you need to be successful to make coding and developing as frictionless as possible. And if you're more than welcome to share those extensions that you've built. Maybe they're for your customers to integrate with your services, or maybe it's just a cool tool that you like for yourself as a community member. If you want, you can go ahead and contribute those extensions back and add them to the marketplace for everyone to use as well. Speaking of the marketplace, this is what it looks like. So in Docker Desktop, we've got this marketplace option, which is new, and you've got like a one-click install to add all sorts of new extensions. And we're constantly growing this list all the time. We're always excited to add new extensions to the marketplace. I think it's a lot of fun to have stuff built up here. You might be wondering, okay, Shai, this extensions thing, this seems pretty cool. How do I get it? And if you're asking me that question, I know that you're not running the latest version of Docker Desktop, because that's how you get Docker extensions. It's just by updating your Docker Desktop to the latest version, and then you will have access to all of those new features as well. So I'm going to go ahead and talk mostly during this session about the Docker Extension SDK. So we're going to be doing all of our building and coding today using this tool. It lets you build extensions with React and TypeScript. It's fast. It has hot reloading, so you can edit your code and the changes are going to be immediately reflected. It's got debugging, so you can get console output and see what's going on. We're using the Material UI theme with some tweaks to it, which lets you replicate that look and feel of Docker Desktop to make it feel like the things that you're building are part of Docker Desktop and they're supposed to be there. And then we've got this extension CLI that you can use to create and manage and install your builds and your extensions as well. And we've got a couple tutorials online to get you started. And we've got all sorts of great stuff that should hopefully make building your extension easier, including support for all platforms, which is the line on the PowerPoint my big head is blocking. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to Docker Desktop now. I'm going to jump out of the PowerPoint. That's all the PowerPoint stuff I have for today. So it's been about 3 minutes of PowerPoint, and now we get to go have fun. Now we get to go click on things, which is my favorite part of every talk. So I'm going to go ahead and get started by pulling up Docker Desktop. And you can see I've got some extensions in the side here. Now, before I go ahead and install anything, I'm going to go ahead and just pull up one of my settings. And I'm going to go down to this extension section. I just want to highlight how I have my settings set up. So I've enabled Docker extensions. If I turn it off, I won't be able to use Docker extensions. So I'm not going to do that because that'll ruin the talk. I've also gone ahead and disabled allowing only Docker Marketplace extensions. I'm going to be creating some extensions today, and I'm going to be able to install them. Whereas if I have the setting enabled, I won't be able to install anything using those SDK tools. And then we also have show the Docker extension system containers. So this is nice because it'll let me see my extension containers right here inside Docker. If I do a Docker PS on the command line, we'll also get them. If I have that disabled, you won't be able to see them. And that can be useful too, because if you've got a lot of extensions or you're not building any extensions and you're just using marketplace ones, they might not be something that you care about and you might not want to see them in your workflow. So something to keep in mind in that setting as you get started. So let's go ahead and add our first extension. So I'm going to go ahead and install one that one of my coworkers built, disk usage. And it's just going to be a one-click install. It's going to take just a second and it'll go ahead and install it. There we go. We have a pop-up that tells us. And so now we can click into disk usage and you can see we've got this new way of viewing reclaimable space. You can see I've got a really big build cache. I don't have any containers. I usually delete my containers before any talks just to try and clean things up and keep the space down as well. And then I've got my images, which are almost a gig, not quite there. I'm using a bunch of really light images today, which is great. So that's our extension example. And if I want to go ahead and delete some extensions, I can just go into this manage extension and I can uninstall things as well. And so next up, I think I'm going to go ahead and show you our GitHub repository. So we've got on the Docker GitHub account, so github.com/Docker, you can go to Extensions SDK. And you can see we've got a bunch of sample extensions in here. We've also got a bunch of tutorials on how to create a bunch of extensions and use a bunch of extensions. We can go ahead and get started by using this. And we've got a quick start guide, which will take you to the Docker docs as well, which is really useful. And it talks a little bit about Material UI and how we use it and our design guidelines if you're curious about those too as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and clone this repository. And by go ahead and clone this repository, what I mean is that I have already done that, so you don't have to watch me do it. So we can go into this Extensions SDK, and we can go ahead and we can go into some of the samples. So here we've got our example sample. Now, I'm going to go ahead and build an extension, install an extension, and update an extension. And I want to do that with one that's really light, so I can show you how that process works. So I'm going to do this with our minimal UI extension, which it looks like is our minimal front end here. Yeah, minimal front end is the extension that we're going to use. So I'm going to go into minimal front end, and I'm going to just open this directory. And you can see it's not got a ton of files here. We've got a Docker file, which is your standard Docker file. So let's do a cat on that. And you can see that we're using from scratch. So this is about as light as any Docker image can get. We've got the name of the image, the description of the image, the vendor, the version. There's going to be an icon that'll be associated with it. There'll be some screenshots and some information that'll be coming along. And then we're going to be copying that UI directory over, and we're going to be copying that metadata.json over as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at the metadata. So let's do cat metadata. And you can see we've configured some things. Now, these are things that Docker Desktop is going to be using to know how to run and configure everything and what to label it as well. So this will be installed, or this will be used during the build and install phase for extensions. So let me do it clear one more time. And then let's go ahead and take a look at that UI. So all we've got is one index.html file. We've got hello community all hands, and we can change that if we want. We've got some styling as well that we can use too. So let's go ahead and build this extension and install it. Now I'm going to do this the old fashioned way, but we do have a make file in here as well. And I'll be using that later on. So you can see here in this Docker extensions, we've got build extension, which is going to do the Docker build for us. And it'll go ahead and set the image and the tag for us. And they've got the extension installed too and an extension update. So I really like using the make files, but for this tutorial, I'm going to do it first with Docker build. So we're going to do a Docker build -t. And we're going to call it shy Ruparel, because that's my name on Docker Hub. And we'll call it min, and we're just going to build it right here. So that's what the period is doing. This is super fast, mostly because I have it cached, a little bit because it's a really small image. So what we've done is we've gone ahead and built that image, and now we're going to install the image as an extension. So we can do a Docker extension ls and see what we've got installed. So right now I have 4 extensions installed, and we can go ahead and do a Docker extension. And let's do help just to see what we've got available. We've got a bunch of commands: init, install, ls, rm, update. And I'm going to go ahead and start with an install. So let's do a Docker install, Docker extension install -help. And we can see all we need to do is give it the image and the tag. So we can do Docker install shy Ruparel -min front. And it's going to ask us, are you sure you want to do this? And I'm sure I want to do this. So I'm going to hit yes. And it's going to install the extension for us. And now over on the side, we've got this minimal front end, and we can see that it says hello world. Let me make sure to fit Ruparel and front Docker extension reset. There we go. Sorry, I was in debug mode, which I'm going to teach you about in just a second. So now we've got that min front. So we've got hello Docker community all hands, which is what I saved in the folder. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up in VS Code, and we can start making some changes. So here, I'm going to go ahead and just change this to hello world. I'm going to save this. And now if we go back to Docker Desktop, it's not going to have changed yet. And that's to be expected because we haven't built the image again and we haven't installed the image again. So let's go ahead and do that really quickly. But instead of doing a build and then an update, I'm going to use the make file this time. So we can do make and we can do update extension. And that's going to go ahead and let me go ahead and change that make file to my name instead of Docker's name. So shy Ruparel, and we'll call this min front again. Otherwise it's just going to, so make update extension. So this is going to go ahead and build the extension for us. And then it's going to ask, are you sure you want to continue? And behind the scenes, all it's really doing is it's running this build extension. So it's going to call build extension, and then it's going to do Docker extension update. So it's just a nice way of doing it in one command instead of having to type two commands in. So I like using the make files instead. I think they're really useful. So we can go ahead and we can restart this application. So we just click off it and we click back on, and we can see that it's updated. So the container shuts down and then it starts back up, and you can see we've got hello world this time. So that's the most basic application we could make possible. It's just one page, and we can do all sorts of stuff with this. Let's say you're statically generating your documentation. Maybe you want to throw your documentation files in there, and that way you have documentation straight in from Docker Desktop. That can be useful, so you don't have to jump back and forth super often. Or maybe you want to put like a little cheat sheet in for yourself too. That could be something you could do that's pretty fun or pretty useful too. So let's go ahead and build something a little more complicated. So we've got a couple other extension examples here. So we've got the React app, which is the one that I'm going to go ahead and show y'all next. So let me clear my screen so it pops off to the top, and I'm going to open this in VS Code again so we can poke around. So here we've got our React application, and I have gone ahead and I've made some changes to it. So let me go ahead and just delete my changes because you don't need to see them yet. So there we go. Now this is going to be the same one as you get from the GitHub repository now. So I've gone ahead and gotten rid of my changes. So this is back to what it looks like out of the box. And you can see that we've got some stuff going on here. We've got the box and button that are coming in from Material UI. And I think later in a little bit, we can have some more stuff. So we'll be able to pull some stuff up from the Material UI. We're using this create Docker desktop client from the extension API client, which is going to let us tap into all sorts of features as well. And so here I've added a console log, and I'm also changed the default to hello Docker community all hands as well. And we're doing using that DD client. We're going to hit the desktop UI. We're going to toast it, which is going to give us one of those cool little pop-ups. So let's go ahead and install this application. So here we are in that React file. And I'm going to do a make install, which is going to go ahead and build it for it. It's going to install the dependencies. Since this is a React app, it is going to have some dependencies. So this is going to take just a second as well. So I'm going to go ahead and pause myself. So I will be back as soon as this is done recording in just a quick snap. Okay. So it looks like it's finished building. It took about 160 seconds or so. And now it's asking, do I want to install it? Of course I do. So I'm going to type in Y, and then it's going to have gone and installed that extension on my machine. So we can see we've got this new one, UI extension. And when we do that click me, we're going to get that hello Docker community all hands, which is pretty fun. Unlike before, I want to show you how to do reloading and make changes and make it so you can see them. So we're going to go ahead and do some debugging style stuff. So what I'm going to do is go back into my terminal, and I'm going to do Docker extension, and I'm going to hit -help again. And I can see that we've got this development option. So let's go ahead and see what's going on there. So Docker extension, dev --help. And you can see we've got 3 commands that we can use. We can enable debug mode, we can change the UI source, and we can reset things. So I've already done an npm install on this directory. I did it beforehand, so you wouldn't have to watch for things to install. So I can run actually this project straight from here. I can run it locally. So if I do an npm start, it's going to go ahead and yell at me because I'm in the wrong directory. And if I do an npm start, it's going to start the development server for me. Let me actually clear this so you can see it at the top of the screen. It'll start the development server, and it'll go ahead and it'll open on page 3000, localhost 3000. So here we go. Gotten something running on localhost 3000. So that's pretty cool, but it's also not super useful right now. So if we take a look at that Docker extension dev command, we can take a look at the UI source. Let me make my font bigger so you can read it. Cool. So let's go ahead and do that. Docker extension dev UI source dash help. And we can see that we can set a source for the extension UI. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So we named our project from before Docker React extension. So let's go ahead and do that. So we can do Docker React extension and then http://localhost 3000. And so now it's gone ahead and changed it to 3000, to port 3000. So if we go ahead and we go into UI extension, in theory, it should be working. And so when we make any changes, that development server will rebuild and it'll update live. So why don't we go ahead and make a quick change, and let me pull up NPM so you can see when it recompiles. So I'm going to go ahead and change it from hello Docker community all. This is the best community all hands yet. And I'm going to save it, and you can see that it recompiled. And now when I click this, it's going to give us the new text, which is great. And I'm also going to go ahead and I'm going to turn on debug mode. So we've got this console log right now, but we don't have a way of seeing it. So I'm going to go ahead and do Docker extension dev debug -- help. You can see it just needs the extension name. So there we go, Docker React extension. We've got ahead and enabled it. So now when we open the extension up for the first time, we're going to get this Chrome development tool. So you can see here that we've got the developer console, and I'm going to move this to the side. And when I click that button, you can see that we get that console log. And that way you can console log your outputs, and you can see what changes you've made and debug your objects, all sorts of stuff there, which is really useful. So we've talked about a bunch of stuff here. We've talked about hot reloading. We've talked about development mode. We've got the React app. And you might be wondering, okay, Shai, this React app is pretty cool, but I don't want to use the sample one. So how do I make one from scratch? And you might think, okay, this could be really hard. I'm going to have to read a lot of documentation and figure out what the commands are to install things from scratch. And I'm really excited to tell you that no, you don't have to do that. In fact, we wouldn't recommend you doing that. So I'm going to navigate straight back to my home directory, documents, Docker, extensions, and then talk. Cool. Oop, not, sorry, CD. I got to do a CD, not a Docker. I can't. That's funny. So there we go, CD. So we're back in my directory. And this time I'm going to call Docker extension init, and I'm going to look at the help command. So it's going to create a new Docker extension for us based on a template. And this is going to take a little bit, but it'll go ahead and it'll set everything up, and it'll give you a pretty blank template that you can use to get started building your own extensions. We're going to set up the React app for you. And that way you can use that kind of as a baseline. And that's what we recommend when it comes to building extensions, is that you use one of our bases, whether it's our samples or doing Docker extension init to get started. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and I'm going to let it go in the background because it'll take a sec. So I'm going to give it my name, Shai Ruparel - my extension, hit enter. I'm going to use the default description, the default vendor, default name, and it's going to go ahead and get started creating this for us. And it's going to build it, it's going to do all the installs for us, which is really useful. So while this is going, I'm going to go ahead and instead of using this as my base directory, I'm just going to go ahead and keep using this React app application that we've already pre-built. And I want to go ahead and let's say I'm going to turn this into a little cheat sheet application. So one of the cool things I've gotten to work on while I've been at Docker is updating our cheat sheet. So we've got a really cool new cheat sheet. We hand it out at all the events that we attend as well. I think it's pretty fun, and you could print it yourself just straight up from our Docker documentation if you want. And I think it could be cool to maybe add some of this information straight into Docker Desktop. So let's go ahead and do that. And first off, we should take a look at the Material UI documentation, because if you take a look at our VS Code project here, you can see that we're using box and button from the Material UI. So let's go ahead and take a look, and you can see this is the default Material UI, and they have all sorts of really fun components that my big head is blocking. And I think it could be cool to maybe take a look and use some of them. So we've got a bunch of interesting text fields we can use as well. And let's maybe take a look at a table. I think it could be cool to use our cheat sheet as like a table or a list. So we've got a table here, we've got a list here as well. So I think we can use table, and maybe we can use typography as well to get this going. Oh, and there's the tabs. There's so many cool components here. I'm a sucker for cool components that other people have made. Which is fun. So we're using box, which is our kind of layout utilities. We can go ahead and keep going with the box. I think the box is fine. And I'm going to go ahead and add some information. So we're going to get started by adding a typography component. It's really easy to add components and use some of these Material UI theme elements. So if we take a look at the source code here, you can see that they're importing typography from Material UI. So if we go back to VS Code, we can do the same thing. So we're going to go ahead and add from this button, we're going to add typography. And now inside the box, we can add a typography component, and my Visual Studio Code just auto completes it for me because it's the best and I love it. So I'm going to do this variant. I'm just going to copy paste it straight out of the UI, so that way you don't have to wait for me to type things in. And I'm going to say, welcome to the Docker cheat sheet, period. And then I'm going to add another line for our body text. And we're going to see here they're using subtitle 1, or I'm going to steal body 1. Let's use body 1 in this instance as well. So let's go ahead and change this to body 1. And then we can go ahead and we can, from our cheat sheet, just steal some of that text as well. Writing copy is unfortunately not part of my skill set. So I'm going to steal this from the cheat sheet and copy paste it, and it's going to save for us. And we'll just clean that up a little bit. So this is saved. We can do some of the auto tabbing as well. Let me just do a format, and we can just prettier. There we go. It's nicely formatted for us. So if we pull Docker Desktop up, you can see that it's gone ahead and it's already updated, which is great. And it looks like the box is just squishing everything together. So let's go ahead and figure out how we fix that. So I think maybe we should go ahead and swap out of using a box into using a grid instead. So let's go ahead and go over to grid, and we can maybe change it. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to swap out box for grid. So all I need to do to get rid of that box element is just delete it, and then we will no longer bring it along. So we're going to get an error here because we are using box, but we're not importing box. So I'm going to swap that to grid. I'm going to change this one at the bottom to grid, and it's going to get rid of the error. Now, I don't actually know if these are going to come along. I don't know if the grid component respects those settings. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete them. I'm going to leave center as well because I like center. Yeah, I'm going to just steal container, direction, center, and row straight from here. And you can play with these. This is a pretty interactive tool, so you can see how things work. And we can go ahead and set some items. So let's go ahead and set our items. So here, all we have to do to add an item is do another grid sub element. So we can do grid, and we can move our typography element inside. And now the Material UI grid is based on a 12 column layout. So if we set this to 12, it's going to go ahead and just fill up the entire space for us. So we can do the same thing here and here, and then we can copy paste this again. And we can put a grid on the bottom as well to close it out. There we go. Let's go ahead and format it prettier so it looks nice, and save. And let's take a look. And you can see that everything's centered. It looks nice. It's responsive. Like the text is filling out all of the space that we've made available as well. So I think that's good enough for just a quick little thing to show off adding Material UI. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just add a table, and we can add some of these cheat commands as well. So maybe we can do the images section. So let's add images as a typography element, and we can add containers as well too. So let's go ahead and do that half thing. So we can do grid item, and we'll set it for 6. We'll set it to 6 here. There we go. And then I'm going to do the same thing again. Another 6. We can go ahead and do typography, and we're not going to do the H1 again. We're going to do something much smaller. So maybe like let's say a H6 this time, or a H5. So we can do typography, and we can do images here. And I'm going to make this a H5, and then we'll do the same thing for containers. And let me prettier it. There we go. If we head back, you can see we've got things divided into two sections. So next up, I'm going to go ahead and add my table element that I've been so excited for. So here we go. We've got table, and there's some great examples here. Let's see which one I kind of like this one. So let's see. They're using a bunch of different features here. They're using table, they're using table body, table cell as well. And that's what I like about Material UI. It's really easy to scroll through and see examples really easily. And we've got some expanding table options, which is nice. We've got some spinning tables, which is nice. But I'm just going to use the first one because it's probably the most simple, the basic table with no frills. And we can see here they're using table body, table cell, table container, table head, and table rows. So we want to use all of those things too as well. So let's do table, table body, table cell, table container, and table head. Container, table head. There we go. So we've gone ahead and saved all of those, and they're grayed out because they're not actually doing any of them. And I'm going to go ahead and just steal some of these as well, because we don't necessarily have a ton of time left in the top, and we can go ahead and manually change them. So we've got in our grid, we've got the image section. So I'm going to go ahead and just add this table. I'm going to get rid of this paper component because I haven't imported that along and I don't want to worry about it. And I can see an error already. I've got table row, which means I didn't import it. So I can fix that really quickly. Now, in my table row, I only really need two things. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all of these extra elements. So it's going to be, in this instance, it's going to be description and command. Description will be here. And then we can do command on the right. And we can go ahead and get rid of some of this extra stuff because we're not going to need it. And we can get rid of this map function. It looks like in the example, they're loading in the data dynamically. I can just copy paste it from right here because I don't have a ton of time. But you can see how you can take the examples from the Material UI theme and use stuff with them. So let's go ahead and just copy the first description, build an image, and then we can steal this command as well. We can put it right next to it as well. And let me go ahead and just make sure to put that in quotes, because it will get mad at us otherwise. There we go. And we can go ahead and format the doc. Again, format prettier. And then when we go back, you can see we've started our build out. So we've got our description, and it looks like the table container is being, oh yes, let me go ahead and delete this width as well. Oh, what did I do? I forgot one. There we go. So yeah, it's going to auto resize it for us. And if I make it a full screen, we'll get the full thing. And we can add that again on the other side to the container section too, and save. And then you can see how I will be able to add all of these items and slowly build out the cheat sheet. So we've gone over a lot of stuff today, and I just want to take a quick second to point at some resources that we can use as you keep going, so you can learn more after the talk. Like I said earlier, we've got that GitHub link that you can take a look of. That's just Docker Extensions SDK. And you can go ahead and click through into the documentation, and it'll show you all sorts of how to get started, how to set up debugging, how to build and install, test and debug, and then how to publish. So if you're looking to get this into the Docker marketplace, you can check that out as well and learn. And also some more information about what the Extension SDK does, what tooling does, a reference for the CLI as well, if that's useful. I didn't really talk too much about the DD client or the Docker desktop client. We've got all of that documented as well, which is really useful. Here's an example of how to do a get to an internal kind of backend. So maybe you want to do some other stuff as well. There's all sorts of examples of what you can do with DD client, how you can interact with actual Docker as well, listing containers, listing images, things like that, which can be pretty useful too, depending on what you build, how you can engage with Docker using that DD client object as well. And so I do hope that what I've done is given you the foundational tools. And since this is just a React-based kind of tool with our extension SDK, if you're able to add it or use it inside React, you're able to add and use it inside of Docker extensions. So I like using fetch with React to do things like use effect, to load in data and then update it after it's loaded, and do async await and stuff like that. And since this is React, you're able to do things like that. So I do hope that you build something cool and you let me know what y'all are building. I'm Ruparel on Twitter. Do shoot me some questions if you have them. Do feel free to share with me what you build, because I love to see what people build. And I hope this was a really informative talk and that you feel equipped to get out there and start making things. That's it for me today, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye, everyone.